Thank you so much. Now I'm going to very briefly introduce, even though these are names that everyone in care about Malaysian politics should know. To my right is YB Anthony Look, who is known for his effectiveness and efficiency running his ministry, but also to bring a more pragmatic and strategic style to his party. To my immediate left is Datuk Sri Azalina Osman Said, one of the most visible and hardworking minister, and we must thank her for fighting off all the Sulu claimants. Congratulations. And further to my left is Datuk Sri Saifuddin Abdullah, my old friend since before 2018, long time ago, 2013. And he is the shadow minister for education and higher education. And previously, he was Minister for Foreign Affairs, Minister for Communications. So we're very lucky to have this. And these sessions, I would go 3 rounds. I'll ask each of our panelists 1 question, and they have about 10 minutes to answer. Then we go for 2nd round. After that, I'll open to the floor. And we had this special issue today. So whoever will ask, I have reserved 10 copy, free copy for you. Provided you ask questions and not starting giving a long commentary. The first questions I want to extend to Datuk Sri Azalina is actually one of the points raised by Tan Sri Wan Junaidi just now. This is about the idea of fixed term parliament. It proposed that the Prime Minister can only seek an early dissolution in 2 circumstances. First, having lost the confidence of the House. Second, a resolution by a 2/3 majorities of MPs. It can also confine the loss of confidence to specifics, confidence and supply would. So no longer everything that by convention would lead to a loss of confidence, a collapse of government, therefore ruling out plots outside parliament. This is a point that why Tan Sri just now mentioned this is tied back to anti-hopping law, because what we want is a more party-based government. Now, most importantly, it increases predictability on governance and policy and reduces speculations and uncertainty. Now, the public and businesses can make planning with roughly a default date for the next election. Datuk Sri Azalina, my good friend, do you support this idea to stabilize our politics, at least to just buy this 15 parliament?
Thank you, Prof. First and foremost, because I came from a political function. And also I thought that being with students, you have to underdress, but unfortunately everybody's overdressing. So I do have to apologize. I usually don't dress like this, but this between, and I think Prof wanted everyone to be here by 3:20, and I was also late by 15, 20 minutes. I'm so sorry. Tan Sri Speaker, my uncle, my brother, which, but as we go along, where we speak, thank you so much. Whatever he said is something that we have been talking about for years and years and years. I think to answer your question on fixed term parliament, I think it depends so much on how you answer it, because you cannot forget when it comes to our constitution, the dissolution of parliament triggers the role of Yang di-Pertuan Agong. Right. So now, if you talk about fixed term, the first preemptive strike you have to look at is to amend the constitution for that, because you have to look into the existing article in the constitution, which is Article 40 bracket 2 bracket B and Article 55 bracket. Now, because of our Commonwealth, our common law system and the way we work between the executive and also the Yang di-Pertuan Agong as being the monarch, so the process must have that buy-in. although you say it's a discretion, but at the same time, there is always an assumption that the executive can present. And you know, I think for the past few sessions, when the musical chair of the last parliamentary session or the government or the prime ministership, you know very well that the meaning of discretion. Does the king take 100% advice, or can the king reject and has his own interpretation whether he wants to dissolve or not? So I think you have to address that first before we talk about a fixed term, because of the way the system works. But of course, if I answer from a general academic point of view, a lot of people believe in the challenges today in any political scenario, not only from our country, but any country in the world. Some people believe a fixed term will be better because it's much easier to govern. That is my answer as someone who has been an MP since 2004. I'm not speaking on behalf of my party, although I am the information head. So, Prof, you promised me, right, today? Yeah. You said, you say anything, but it's not going to bind your party, because I can't answer for my party. But for myself, of course, it's logical in the sense of it's much easier to govern. And then when you talk about a minority government, I think what Prof says is correct. You don't have to go in with minority government and you have to search for coalition partners. Then you can just go on the CSA relationship. And then you say, well, you know, this is what we agree with. But again, for myself now, which I've witnessed when Bersatu, a PN, came to power, and then after that, when Prime Minister came from my party, and then you talk about the CSA to continue, and you talk about relationship, it's quite difficult the way our system works, because we're not a presidential system. As you know, our system is more of a Westminster system. So practically on the ground, it does have its own challenges. That's my view as a MP from 2004, not as a minister, nor as a head of information for my party. Thank you. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. I should apologize for not stating that the House rule in advance. When I reach out to my ministerial friends, including our shadow minister, I make it a point and say that we want a candid conversation. And therefore, if I'm going to hold you by whatever you say and say, is that a cabinet decision? Is that your party decision? Everyone will be extremely careful, and then we will not have anything interesting here. So please do not use it against them and say, you know, and ask the rest of the government and say, when you're going to implement this, this is their personal opinion. And I appreciate this, but I just want to respond to this, not wanting to be the fourth panelist here. When we talk about fixed term parliament in the case of UK, it directly affects the monarch's power because they do not have a written constitution. But over here, if we're going to have a fixed term parliament, we can completely leave the royal power untouched. The reason why is because that a fixed term parliament act in the simplest form would only tie the hand of Prime Minister, meaning the Prime Minister cannot now ask for a dissolution anytime he or she wishes. Because by convention, our monarch would just say yes. So that's actually hold back the hand of the Prime Minister. And why this is useful, because it takes away the point of speculation. For example, if the government defying all the competitions, win big in the state election, probably there were people who say, Prime Minister Anwar, you should dissolve the parliament now, go for a coup, right? But if this is the thinking we have, then we cannot talk about stability, because every time after the election ends, that will be the starting point of a campaigning period for the next election. So what we are talking about this is to basically stretch out, reduce the element of uncertainty, of opportunism, so that people would become more fixed, accepted that what's come next. Now, without going longer, my next questions would be for YB Anthony. Anthony, you have expressed more than once that coalition partners in a federal government should not contest against each other in state elections, as it may affect the stability of the federal government, as how competition between PN and BN in Sabah, Malacca, and Johor state election had destabilized the Muhyiddin and Ismail governments. Now, while this may make sense for the upcoming state elections in the state peninsula states, can it work in Sabah and Sarawak when their next state election are due in 2015 and 2016? For example, would DAP agree to contest only for the 2 state seats it currently holds in Sarawak and leave GPS for the rest? And if in the case of Sabah, if GRS, BN, and PH and Warisan all agreed to not contest against each other in Sabah, we already have this debate now between GRS and BN Sabah, then Sabahan basically have limited options except PN, right? Is that good? Now, given Malaysia's, this is my real question, given Malaysia maturing into multi-party competition, do you think it is time we should think out the box and introduce a mixed member majoritarian system where voters are given 2 votes, 1 ballot for constituency representative, as we currently have now under first past the post, and the second would directly for the party to have additional members of MP elected on party lists, which would allow coalition partners to collaborate on first past the post constituency election and to compete against each other for party lists.
Thank you, Prof. Wong. Good afternoon, everyone, fellow panelists and Tan Sri Speaker Dewan Negara. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I can't escape by saying that whatever I said is personal opinion, because I'm the Secretary General of the party. As the leader of the party, whatever I said, to a certain extent, carries the weight of the party. So unlike Zarina can escape that anything goes wrong, as I say, is a personal opinion. I don't think that applies to me. So as usual, I will still be very candid. Why I said so, that if a pre-election coalition, whatever, I mean, the unity government was formed as a post-election coalition. Okay? We did not have any kind of understanding or formal discussion prior to the general election, but we formed the coalition 2 days after the general election. The first official discussion was held on 21st of November. That was the first time where we went for dating. Okay? That was the first time that we met each other formally in a setup, in a meeting. So it is a post-election coalition that we are having right now. But going into the state election, we are going back to the pre-election coalition, because we will have some sort of understanding in terms of not overlapping seats to go into the election. And we will campaign in this coming state election as one team, PH plus Barisan Nasional, against Perikatan Nasional. So it is a pre-election coalition. And knowing well that the moment, if we form the state government, then both coalition will be represented in the state government. So this is something that from a post-election coalition going back to a pre-election coalition. And it's very important that we must have this understanding. As way back in January, after we formed the federal government, I told my colleagues in PH, I said for this government to stay intact and to maintain stability within the coalition government, we must first ensure that there will be no contest against each other in the coming state election, because that will definitely be instability if we were to contest against each other. Because I think the lesson drawn from Sabah, from Malacca, from Johor shows that it will not be tenable, that you are sitting together in Putrajaya, but you're fighting each other at the state election. That is definitely a no-go. So steps must be taken to ensure that we must have an understanding going into the election to show that we are here to stay, we have a stable government, and we want to go into the election together as one block. So that is my answer to your question. As for Sabah and Sarawak, I can only say that politics is dynamics. We have another 2 to 3 years and no seats negotiation will ever be held 3 years before the state election. Let's be honest about it. Okay, I think many of us went through. Saifuddin, Dato' Saifuddin, of course, we were friends together. We are still friends. Of course, I don't hold any grudges. So we went through a lot of process together, a lot of cycles, negotiation and all that. I think everyone will agree with me that no negotiation will ever be held 2 to 3 years before the state election. I think right now, let's be practical about it. We are still a very new coalition as far as the unity government is concerned. We need time to build up the relationship, and that's what we are doing right now, in the process of building relationship, building trust. And hopefully, of course, as far as I'm concerned, I would do my very level best to ensure that this government works, that this coalition is here to stay. So by then, after 2 or 3 years, if we have a good working relationship and that we show sincerity to work together, then I'm sure that the negotiation will be quite easy. I don't see negotiation as a zero-sum game. It must be a package deal. It must be a win-win situation. It must be based on rarity. It must be based on practical solution. And I think that we can deal with the Sabah and Sarawak election when the time comes. So that's my answer.
Plan tambahan, YB. It is certainly the case now. The question I want to pose is that if you have a first past the post system for you to build a pre-election coalition, you need to have transferability of your supporters' votes to each other. And this is what we see currently PH and UMNO facing. It's very hard to persuade ex-rival to become new lovers. And so the question I pose is that if this is the challenge going on, we know you have no problem forming post-election coalitions, right? Do you think it is time, not now, but before GE16 or before GE17, we should have a serious discussion talking about tweaking our electoral system to introduce party list seats?
Well, first of all, I have no problem of a party list system. Okay, this proposal was not new. In fact, it was discussed 10 years ago in 2012 when we have this Parliamentary Select Committee on Electoral Reform, right after the Bersih 2 demonstration, that the government, led by Dato' Sri Najib, formed a special select committee. I was a member of that select committee, and that was one of the proposals mentioned. But of course, at the time, we were just focusing on some very, very immediate solutions, some immediate steps to strengthen the electoral system. We know that it's very hard to change the entire system. But now, of course, any possibility can happen. I think, in fact, this is the best timing in terms of talking about real reform to our system. Provided that, knowing politicians, knowing political parties, every political party will first calculate whether that benefits me. If it's beneficial to me, that it helps my political survival, then everybody will be on board. I think that is a very, very practical consideration. Just like the anti-hopping law. Why we were able to get general consensus, put aside the MOU between the government and opposition? Because I think every party then look at the needs of it, that every party needs that to protect their own turf. UMNO needs it, PH needs it. I'm sure many other parties look at that as something that they need it. So PAS needs it as well, because PAS was a victim of political fraud, of hopping. So when we put that into the discussion, every party can easily agree to it. So same goes to this two-tier system. If we have a party list and as well as a constituency base, something which, of course, I think it can be discussed, but whether or not it is suitable, but I think the parameters must be very clear. What are the costs to it? What are the benefits to it? And as far as if you want to introduce party lists, but of course the other practical problem will be you need to enlarge the parliament. Okay, whether or not the general public will accept it. From 222, if you talk about a two-tier system, you must at least increase parliamentary size by another 50% to over 300 MPs. That definitely will be a cost to it. There will be taxpayers have to pay more to MPs because you employ more people. So whether or not that is something that the public are ready for it, that is another issue. Because sometimes when we talk about all this reform, ideal situation that we want to achieve, it's not necessary that the public will buy it, because they will look at it as something as wasting taxpayers' money. You already have enough 232 guys shouting at each other every day. You add on another 100 guys, you add on another 100 days of sittings, and so they will be continue shouting. So people might not necessarily agree to it. So that is my point of having this reform.
Right. Okay. Let's go back to whether our future MPs would adhere to Tan Sri Wan Junaidi suggestions that they get more professionalized. Now, I want to turn to Datuk Sri Saifuddin Abdullah. Malaysians want to see political stability, international investors as well. They want to see political stability. We want to see both a competent government and an effective opposition. However, the talks of another midterm government change, another Sheraton Move 2.0 has not subsided since the end of the election. But the other side of the coin is that at the same time, oppositions are denied equal constituency development fund. And shadow cabinet is not recognized. I'm going to ask you in the second round more about shadow cabinet. But Datuk Sri Saifuddin, do you think there should be a peace deal between the Madani government and the PN opposition, as what we saw in 2011, the MOU signed, 2021, the MOU signed between the Ismail government and PH opposition. At that time, that was sort of a confidence and supply agreement. This time, it's a different kind of deal, but do you see there's a need for a peace deal to pave way for healthy and professional competition so that Malaysia may have political stability and accountability? And to ask that is because what if you cannot change the government, what are you going to do as opposition for the remaining of 4 years, right? Should the government provide more facilities for you to be more effective? And would this happen after the state elections? Again, your personal opinion, not binding your party or coalition.
Thank you for pronouncing my name correctly. I'm not Saifuddin Nasution.
Did I say?
No, I said thank you for pronouncing my name correctly. Tan Sri Jeffrey, Tan Sri Wan Junaidi, brothers and sisters, I think we need a Sunway move, langkah Sunway, that brings about positive changes in furthering our process of democratization. And I think this is a very good discussion that we're having this afternoon. Congratulations. We have to be on board. Everyone has to be on board in trying to make our democracy more matured, regardless which party we are coming from. And I always believe that for Malaysia, our democracy must be something that is multiracial and something that is moderate. And the reform must go on, including what was alluded to very comprehensively by Tan Sri Speaker. On the CSA, Confidence and Supply Agreement, the first issue is that we do not have a proper tradition on the CSA. And by the way, I must commend Anthony and the other brothers and sisters from various parties who actually started working on the CSA from the time when Tan Sri Muhyiddin was the Prime Minister. Yeah. But it only materialized during the time when Ismail Sabri was Prime Minister. I can say, among others, on my side of the floor at that time was Tengku Zafrul. So I know Anthony and a few others. I cannot reveal the others unless they forwardly come and say, yeah, but I know. yeah, Kiang Meng, Tony Pua. On our side was Tengku Zafrul, among others. Yeah. Okay. I mean, I have to state this because one of our weakness in Malaysian, not only politics, in many areas is we don't have proper documentation. And we need to document some of these, well, some are like unsung heroes who actually work behind the scene to get things done. Now, we need a proper understanding of what a CSA is all about. I mean, you can call it MOU, you can call it anything, but we need to have a proper understanding, to institutionalize it. We have to write it down, not necessarily as an act, because that will make it very difficult and very rigid, but at least it has to be well documented so that we know exactly what we want. So I can outline, for example, 4 basic content of the CSA that I would like to have. Number 1 is the role of the opposition leader. The MOU had stipulated certain role for Datuk Seri Anwar when he was opposition leader, but almost nothing is happening when now Hamzah is the opposition leader. Do we then take automatically what was then allocated to Anwar to what is now supposed to be allocated to Hamzah? It's not happening. That's what I mean by it is not institutionalized. We can always improve on it. And what do I mean by the role of the opposition leader? Okay, we can start with something as simple as what is his status, what is his protocols provided to by the parliament, by the government. What about his role in the agenda setting? We are very clear that the Ketua Majlis is the Prime Minister of the day, but can we not have the opposition leader also contributing to the aturan urusan mesyuarat, so that yes, urusan kerajaan, government matters should be the priority, but Tan Sri mentioned about private bills, but I'm going further than private bills. I'm going towards non-governmental matters to be raised by the opposition leader in coming up with the aturan or the what you call agenda of the meetings. Of course, there is a platform for it to be discussed, which is the Jawatan Kuasa Dewan, the committee that decides. Is it Jawatan Kuasa Dewan or Jawatan Kuasa? I mean, there is already a permanent committee that decides on the items. What about his officers, his staffing, and so on and so forth? Now, in Pahang, for example, there is no recognition of Ketua Pembangkang. Tuan Ibrahim Tuan Man is now de facto opposition leader of Pahang. We call him opposition leader, but in the first sitting of the Dewan Undangan Negeri Pahang of the State Assembly, he was not given due recognition to be seated as a Ketua Pembangkang. He was seated, just like the State Assemblyman. Now, how many states have a recognized opposition leader? Number 2, the role of the opposition. Whether the opposition wants to call itself a shadow with a shadow cabinet, or in our case, portfolio, it is not really recognized. It is not yet recognized in our constitution. It's not recognized officially in parliament. Don't mention about Pahang. What about the supporting officers? What about the budgetary requirement, the allowances, the expend on expenses, on the media, on research and development, and so on and so forth. Number 3, we need, some people talk about we need to enlarge or increase the number of select committees. I think we now have 10. We used to have 10 in the past too. I think for now, probably 10 or 12 is quite sufficient, but we need some kind of permanency to some, if not all, of the select committees. And so there are 2 points here. 1, yes, we now have 10. Probably we can enlarge it to 12. I'm not a fan of going 15 or 16. Let's go phase by phase, step by step. So 10 is okay, but the last 10 in the last term and the current 10, they don't seem to gel. We keep on changing. But that is quite all right because each parliament may want to design the select committees in a certain way. But perhaps 2 or 3 have to be more permanent. For example, on security, number 1. Number 2, on international relation. I agree, Tan Sri. Even if we don't bring it to the floor, at least we bring it to the select committee. For the select committee to look at those agreements that the Prime Minister wants to sign with his counterpart. And on economy, for example, and the Parliament may decide something that is more permanent in nature, rather than every term the select committees will change in terms of its names, its TOR, and so on and so forth. And number 4 is Constituency Allocation Act. This is the debate among MPs now. Opposition MPs are not given any allocation. So there is this suggestion that we have to come up with some kind of law, probably called Constituency Allocation Act, so that no matter what happened, MPs will be given allocation. Though I must give my own caveat. I'm not a big fan on constituency development funding for MPs. There is a difference between giving allocation for administration of the MP's office in Parliament and in the constituency versus the other one, that you get 1 million or somebody get 1.5 million or somebody. I'm not a big fan. If you ask me, I don't agree at all. It's not the work of the MP to administer this amount of money. That should be under the district office. The MP can always fight for it or shout for it and write for it and lobby for it. But I don't think I have any business doing it. There are thousands of reasons why I don't agree with that. So we have to look at the CSA as something that needs to be institutionalized, needs to be more formalized as part and parcel of the holistic or comprehensive parliamentary reform. Thank you.
Tambahan.
Wah, kena juga.
Yeah. What's the chance of us seeing this after the dust settle on the state election?
I think we are all hopeful that we need some kind of stability. Yeah. Now I know there will be 1 month after the state election, between the 19th of September, there will be a special sitting. And that special sitting of Dewan Rakyat and Dewan Negara is to debate the midterm review of the of the 12th Malaysia Plan. I'm not sure whether we are going to Dewan Rakyat. Some of us will be debating on the actual Rancangan Malaysia ke-12, or some of us may end up in the shouting match, still not settled 1 month after the state elections in the 6 states. But I'm hopeful that we will have some kind of stability. But this calls for MPs and leaders to be more policy-oriented rather than personality-oriented. I think one of the biggest problems in Malaysian politics is we are so obsessed or engrossed in personalities rather than policies. So
since this is promised by both PH and BN, and this would be held against you before GE16, do you see the realistic chance the separations of PP from AGC would happen before end of 2027?
I hope so. And also to answer that, I would tie it with the element of, I think this particular session, because it's a coalition government, the parliamentary select committee, the PCSSC, must and will play a more important role.
Right.
I was with the Human Rights Select Committee, and they are working together with the Women and Children Select Committee, looking into issues of citizenship. So And I mooted the idea that not only bringing NGOs on board to speak, and don't wait for when the bill is on the table. Continue to engage, especially stakeholders. And that's the beauty part, is because the select committee, which I think what the speaker is trying to emphasize, Parliament can play that role, not only during the sitting, before the sitting or during sitting or after the sitting, to play that role, to engage, because the PSSC consists of members of political party from all blocks. And the block of the coalition government or the unity in the government is not just in reference to executive.
Yeah.
It also applies to the MPs because, for example, to get any of this amendment that we are speaking, Parliamentary Services Act, the AGSG splitting, the citizenship is a 148 or above. So which means to say, the rakyat voice cannot just be through the MP or through the executive, but the responsibility must also be shifted to the other MPs. And it should be engaged now, not when the bill is on the table. So the same thing, I think you remember for the anti-hopping law, Tan Sri Junaidi was the minister, and then he was chairing so many meetings, and we were in and out, we're talking about it. We triggered with the private members bill, that was one strategy. Then the government decided to speak about it. The same thing with the tobacco bill. It went on that way, then it comes in. So what I'm trying to say now, to your question, Prof, is that it's not just on the burden of the executive.
I completely agree.
The select committee.
Yes, this is where I want to echo back what Dr. Sri Saifuddin say, and also taking a leaf from the successful model of anti-hopping provisions headed by Tan Sri Junaidi. Our select committee for elections, institutional reform, and human rights is actually overburdened. Even the NIMS has covered such a wide range of area, but there's only 9 of them. Do you see a need to create a specific PSSC, perhaps just for the separations of AGC and PP?
But it can also be done just with a select committee, can see?
Yeah,
the
but
special
then
select committee is like what they did for anti-hopping law,
yeah,
which is a higher level, can see, whereby the chair is by the minister. It can, yeah, he can answer. Please, Tan Sri. Thank you.
That is why I mentioned just now, there are 3 things I got to do. One is the introduction of Parliamentary Service Act. Second, to amend the Privilege and Powers Act. Third one, to amend the standing orders, both the Dewan Rakyat and Dewan Negara, because at the moment, we don't really have the departmental select committee like being exercised by or practiced by any other Commonwealth countries, because there's no provision under our standing orders. Because the standing order design 1956, long before English produced their select committee, because the select committee practice in England only started in the 70s. That's why we didn't have it. And we never amend ours. And I am going to amend it. That's what I'm talking about. So that all these things will be regularized. One is about the joint select committee, include both the Dewan Negara and Dewan Rakyat, both, for something more important than the usual routine work of the select committee. Something like, okay, the separation of AG and AGSG office. I know the reason behind it was one of them, like what has been said by Datuk Sri Azalina, is finance. It costs about 150 million just to separate both, because they both need library, staffing as advisor to the government, and of course, the other one will adopt all the facilities owned by the present AG. And for the purpose of select committee, we at the moment only 5 permanent select committee. That permanent select committee, in-house select committee. And the one we are using, I think, Peraturan or rules number 81/1 is for a special select committee with the government use. One, about what Datuk Sri Azalina said, when we disallowed the non-Muslim to have more than 1 wife in 1975, introduced the Family Law Act, because it's very controversial. It involved a lot of people. My friend said, you deprived me of my 2nd wife. I say maybe it was done before my time. The other one is the drug law when we want to introduce the death penalty, 1985. And we amend the CPC and Penal Code in 2005, where now I think they facilitate the trial of criminal cases by exchange of document, which we never did before. And she's a legal practitioner, she knew it. And now we don't have those kind of select committee. Those select committee now under 81(1) is only for the government purpose. Government vehicle, the moment it's finished, it's done with, finished. So that is why you must have another rules for the departmental select committee. Okay, the numbers is up to both the parliament and the government to decide on. Maybe there is some committee on ad hoc basis. Like in Australia, they have a committee, they call it Aborigine committee to look into the affair of the Aborigine. Here, maybe we have something like Orang Asli, the Penan, the marginalized group of people, select committee. That may be both houses. But we don't have that power to do that here. This is why the amendment ought to be done. And what is the question just now?
That should we have a specific committee like your anti-hopping committee?
Of course, this is what I say. We can appoint the select committee either from both house agreement, joint select committee, if the amendment has been done. Or the government appoint a special select committee under 81(1) for a period of time, make the period of 2 years, just like what we did to CPC Penal Code 2005-2006. And we made our report 2006 and implemented by the government 2007. And the anti-hopping law was under CSA. Of course, Malaysia used the word MOU. It is exactly the same. MOU, CSA, both agreement is not enforceable in court. It is the agreement of members of parliament, how to make it work for a parliament, for the government, which has no good majority, with only simple majority, most probably couldn't push for it. In Northern Ireland, they failed for reason of demand by Northern Ireland for £1 billion for agriculture subsidy. That's why it failed, because of that only. But in Malaysia, we succeeded in doing it. So I think the CSA, not that there's any country in the world formalized or institutionalized, it's just like what Datuk Sri Saifuddin said, no country in the world have formalized or institutionalized the idea of CSA or MOU like what we did. But it could always be practiced. The government itself must be flexible, and the members of parliament must be professional. I think the reason why it worked during Ismail's time was because all the people involved, Anthony was there, I was there, Govind Singh was there, and Datuk Sri Azalina was there. You were there? No.
Yeah, you were part of the 10 members, right?
No, she was not.
I was
Govind was there,
Oh.
and then Salahuddin Ayub was there. So Anwar Musa was there. And then we were very, very professional. We never talk about politics. We just talk about the nation, the rakyat. All the interests of the nation and the rakyat, because we talk about the COVID, how much provision we want. The government want to produce only 45 billion. No, we don't want 45. We want 55. That's what the opposition say. We agreed. The government agreed. Oh, of course, I was the secretariat to it. My office was the secretariat by accident. So I did all the job practically. It worked so well. When we introduced the bill, the engagement that I did, even it was only the group of 5 MPs wanted to see me, they can come to see me in the office without any protocol, without anything. I will tell and explain to them at length on the purpose of the anti-hopping law. But we still got to accommodate because some disagree with certain provision. I was supposed to have designed one of the best anti-hopping bill they ever produced, because I look what happened in India, what happened in UK, and what happened in New Zealand. And of course, Singapore, it never happened.
That's right.
So we knew the weakness. So I tried to plug the loophole, but then it was opposed. Both the cabinet rejected, and I have to come. I didn't give up. I came up with another one. I think the best thing that happened was when both the AP and UMNO rejected the bill to amend the constitution and allow the Act of Parliament to be created to do the anti-hopping. And I took the opportunity to become the chairman of the select committee that look update later on. Then I can steer the thing, and that's how it worked. Thank you.
Tan Sri, perhaps hopefully that after the state elections that you and Tan Sri Johari Abdul may facilitate the inter-party negotiation for more sustainable political stability. But before that, and I would like to ask last two questions to YB Anthony and Datuk Sri Saifuddin. Wouldn't be long because I want to invite the floor to ask more questions. Now, for Anthony, DAP was a key mover for the equal constituency development funding in the MOU sign, right? And now that PH is in the driver's seats in the government, when will we see a law that would provide for equal constituency development fund? Your personal opinion? And do you believe that all states, including those that DAP has substantial say, should have similar laws too?
Well, first of all, the Constituency Development Fund, when it was agreed upon, part of the MOU, you have to understand the context that it was a deal, package deal together with the government. It was not an institutionalized allocation. And the Constituency Development Fund is parked under the PM's department, and it is a prerogative of the Prime Minister to approve that funds. On record, the current Prime Minister has actually mentioned in Parliament that we are prepared to discuss with the opposition, and he invited the opposition to have discussion headed by the Deputy Prime Minister Fadila on terms that we have to agreed upon in terms of handing the allocation to the members of Parliament from the opposition, provided there are some parameters that we have to agree upon. So that is on record already an offer by the government. So that must be clearly spelled out. Of course, ideally, that Constituency Development Fund can be made into a law. This is something that I think both Azalina and I have mentioned before GE15. Of course, I stand by what I said. I'm consistent about that's supposed to be a legislation. It's not supposed to be just a prerogative. It's supposed to be a legislation to be fair to the constituents, to be fair to the constituency held by the opposition. That should be given across the board. On this, of course, ideally, as what Datuk Saifuddin Abdullah said, this is not our job as MP. But in the Malaysian context, this is very important that you can talk about all big reforms and all that, but you go to the ground, you go to the constituency, the Parent and Teachers Association asked for funds that I want to repair the toilets of the schools. If you are an MP, you are leader of the constituency, you can't even repair the toilets of the schools. What reform are you talking about? So those are very practical issues that we face on the ground. And I understand that that is very, very important as far as for the elected reps is concerned. Of course, I have been deprived for allocation for so many years as opposition. I'm all for it that you want to legislate it as an institutional allocation for all. That is something that I would definitely agree to it. But as you know, government is not decided by DAP, just for the information, even though the DAP SG supports it, doesn't mean that it will become a decision to impress upon you that DAP does not dominate the government, right? We need a consensus of all parties to push for any legislation.
I hope Dr. Mahathir is listening to this show. Now, thank you so much, YB Anthony. So to Datuk Sri Saifuddin. I must say, first of all, congratulations to PN for setting up the first real shadow cabinet, the closest to what is functioning. because that you separate them from the backbench MPs and so on. And at least two ministers, Datuk Sri Azalina here and Datuk Sri Salahuddin Ayub and a former minister, Dr. Zulkifli Ahmad, welcomed this move. We hope that this would bring us to the standards of other Commonwealth democracies like UK, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and so on. However, we have not heard much about Shadow Minister pursuing their policy agenda. Could you enlighten us on what PN Shadow Minister are doing and how? The second part is your wish list. What would you like to see to be done by the Madani government in recognizing and supporting your shadow cabinet if it wants a healthy competition and political stability?
Yeah, but just before that, I want to touch very briefly on what was discussed by Azalina. I think one of the advantage that Azhar is having is that you have MPs, even from the opposition, who used to be in government, who were discussing the same matters in cabinet before. And that's one of the main reasons why the mandatory death, what you call law, was easily passed and with the support of both sides of the house. Yeah, so you can actually go to each and every MP who used to be in the cabinet, from Mahathir 2.0 to Muhyiddin to Ismail Sabri, and say, come, you better support me because you used to discuss the same matter. And I have the records. Okay. I think Australia and the UK and Canada and New Zealand, they have experienced this thing called shadow cabinets from 1920s. The first time the term shadow cabinet was used in Malaysia was by BN in 2018, and then later on by PH in 2021. So PN is very cautious in trying to use the term shadow cabinet. We do not want to be accused of being too ambitious, and that's the reason why we simply use the term portfolio. On 29th of December 2022, I launched the Perikatan National Shadow Cabinet of Pahang, and that's the first in the whole country where a state assembly has a shadow cabinet. But of course, it's not recognized by the State Assembly of Pahang, but nevertheless, we want to do it. We launched our shadow cabinet or portfolios on the 2nd of February 2023. There are 26 portfolios, almost a mirror to the portfolios of the cabinet, except one or two. For instance, for education and higher education, we combined it into one. Now, the main objective or the goal or the aim is really to come up to become a constructive opposition, an opposition that is professional and progressive. We have been doing some work. I'm sure you noticed that there have been responses from us. We try to be as disciplined as, for example, as possible, for example, on international issues, even though I was a former foreign minister twice, but I refrained from making statement because the shadow minister is Wan Ahmad Faisal. And Razi Jidin, even though he's former minister of education, but he refrained making statement except to rebut on one or two issues, but he refrained from making statements on education because the shadow minister is someone else. So we try to discipline ourselves. We try to come up with coordinated responses. And I can say that we have submitted one private member bills motion that is by the MP of Jasin on the word Allah. It was turned down, but at least we have come up with that motion. And the education portfolio of Perikatan National has proposed on education reform, which covers 5 areas. I won't go into the detail. We have had our meetings of the head of portfolios, but not yet that regular as one would want to have it, like cabinet meetings that meets every Wednesday or every Friday when the House is sitting. but I think we are working towards that. So it's a phase-by-phase kind of development. Phase one is getting the portfolios intact, trying to do more than just, opposing whatever that is presented by the government. So for us, being constructive is yes to oppose, but we are also prepared to amend or to support, or when there is a need to propose reform, to propose a white paper, or to propose a bill or something to that extent. My wish list?
Yes.
If only PN governed states can start doing more than what we are doing now. I mean that's the hard fact of it, lah. I think well, it's not going to be easy. Now it's PRN. I won't say that we are confident to win, blah blah blah. That sounds very political, but I think I would take it upon myself that if trying to be very diplomatic, sitting beside Azalina, when we win the states, then I think PN-run states should try and do something to encourage the opposition to form a proper shadow or portfolio cabinet, if you like, and then the government start doing what things that I have been listing down as something that we want the government of the day at the federal level to do. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now, this is leadership by example, starting demanding of your own states. The program is supposed to end at 5:30, and Datuk Sri Azalina unfortunately has another function to go. So I want to quickly invite questions. I have 5 minutes to collect all the questions, and everyone who asks questions, okay, so friends, please help me to pass that mic. No commentary, questions. Everyone after asking questions, then 1, 2, 3. Anyone else? Okay, so go to them. And you get a free copy of our journal special issue. And questions, number 4 from here. Questions for Datuk Sri Azalina would get prioritized first, and then we invite the rest. Yes, please. Introduce yourself, quickly get into the questions. Yes, a bit louder so that the TV can catch.
Hello.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So my name is Ernest. I'm currently a student. So let's just put it there then, simple answer. So I think first things first, I think when Anthony actually mentioned about the question of enlarging the parliament, I think that'll come to the issue of when you have more MPs, there comes more cost. But I think indirectly, part of the reason why you have such higher costs running is that MPs are somewhat indirectly expected to run their constituencies and attend to their concerns of the people. I think Seremban has its own issues, Perangkat has its own issues, Indra Mahkota has its own issues, right?
Can you turn that into a question form?
Yes, okay. So my question is, I understand that Ngah Komeng has stated that local elections would not be explored or would not be pursued as his policy agenda, at least for now. But would there be an exploration of perhaps reigniting or rather restarting local elections soon in order to combat, say, the workload of parliamentarians in
Very good questions. Next. Okay.
Yeah.
And after that, the two ladies. Yeah.
Okay. My name is Sheikh Irfan. I'm a first year governance and public policy student. My question is headed to Datuk Sri Azalina Osman. So in the effort of parliamentary reform, the unity government has introduced a PMQ session every Tuesday. It was a pilot test started from February. Whether it is effective or not, I think that is up for debate. But my question is, are the government planning to formally introduce it as through the amendment of Standing Order 24 of the House? And if not, what's stopping from the government to do so? That's all.
Thanks. Next. Yeah. And then after that, Liana.
Hi, my name is Ainus Niza. So this question is directed to towards anyone. So my question is, how can a government strike a balance between policy implementation and maintain coalition teamwork to ensure effective governance? Because as we know, in order to evade from getting into a situation like a hung parliament, there's a lot of compromise and negotiation within coalitions to ensure a functioning government. So that will be resulted in delayed reform and also policy implementation. So how do we ensure that the policies are implemented more efficiently?
Thanks. Liana from British High Commission.
Thanks, Junhwat. My question is to all panelists, and answer this in an academic setting. I won't hold you accountable to it. Do you think it's time for us to move past first past the post? Should we have mixed member proportional, especially to have more women in parliament?
Hui, I just want to ask, given the current scenario where the possibility of a hung parliament could increase in the upcoming next general election, my question is to YB Datuk Sri Azalina. Do you see that there's a possibility of greater involvement of the young Di-Pertuan Agong, whether he likes it or not?
Thank you. I think I asked the last question, answer the last question first. I think your question should also apply parallelly to the state government election, because you cannot deny the role of the rulers in appointment of, especially of the government or government of the day or even the state government. The concept of coalition, I think the coalition government or unity government, that is not the first time under the Madani setup. It was also in existence in the Perak state government, if you recall, before the last dissolvement, you remember? And also in reference to the Pahang state government. Now, both the Pahang and Perak is being led by an UMNO UMNO leader, the state liaison leader. But the relationship, even way back before. So what I'm saying is that, of course, you cannot deny the rule of the rulers, which I've emphasized. I think if you compare us and the Westminster system, they only have got one king. We have got a rotation, and also to the state. And this is the peculiarity of our situation, because I always believe it's not just like a separation of powers of judiciary, legislative, executive. You have also the fourth element, and as that applies. So your question is that the participation. So of course, this unity government is a government. This Madani government is a decree government. Because I think you see the follow-up, the build-up to it, right? Menghadap Tuanku Agong, and then the leaders of the party explain. It is a participation. So it also may happen to the state depending on the voting, because the rakyat has made their choice. And if you talk first past the goal, even one vote is you're the winner. What about the majority or the minority that did not vote for you, but it's a high number by what, 51% to 49%. So that is also applying in the flip side of the parliament for constituency development fund. The argument is very deep, because the rakyat wants to be protected, but some arguments that why should we take care of you? You don't vote for us. So these are academic questions that we continuously as a nation must embark in. And a lot of people say, well, after we vote, then you must represent us. But unfortunately, when the MP is, without the anti-hopping law, when an MP is in the day one, the MP in our system can cross the floor when it comes to issues or policy affecting their constituency. The speaker will not punish the MP, but the party will punish the MP. So these are living variables that you have to look at. That is my answer to your question. You asked the question of the PM question time. At least we've got the PM on Tuesday to answer. That's what we want. But of course, for me as a minister in charge, I may want to mold the idea of only the question will be, now we have got 3 questions. Maybe to look at it shorter, like only 1 question within that 30 minutes. Because questions are very relevant, and that's good. Because if ministers answer question, it's always a policy answer. And sometimes the whole purpose of the minister's question time or the prime minister's question time is to get the person in charge of the ministry to answer the questions. so that the MPs are more satisfied with the answer. So we evaluated for the last sitting is that when the Prime Minister answers 3 questions from 3 ministries, sometimes it's not enough time. So I have, again, to bring it to Cabinet for a policy consideration. But of course, I believe the Prime Minister's question time is very relevant, and it's good to get the Prime Minister to stand there and be answerable. I think it's fantastic in my personal view. My personal view, don't misquote me. And then you asked a question in reference to local government election. That one, the minister in charge. Oh, gender quota. Well, you know, depends lah. Oh, not you. You asked gender quota. Oh, you asked gender quota. Yeah. I can't answer because, you know, if you look at every political party now with this state election, everybody says, you know, you want the so-called 30%. But in the end, you evaluate the candidate. Suddenly, you know, the candidacy is based on performance ability. So you cannot go on that. So it's very difficult to answer because, you know, not in the party leadership to make that decision. But some people tell me, well, if you have more women leaders at the top, maybe it's easier to get to the numbers. But even that, there's no guarantee. Because at the end of the day, for us in a Westminster system, we want to win. And winning means you want the best candidate that we are offering the rakyat for that particular seat. And what is the best candidate? So that is basically how the party evaluates. That's my personal view. But of course, I hope they would consider. But of course, behind closed door, we're always harassing them to get the numbers. So that is my job as representing my party, quietly talking. We want to see there are good candidates, women candidates. That's our job. Thank you.
If I can help Liana to expand that point, is that if you have a party list, you can easily fix the number, how many % of women candidate you want to put in. So then you would be able to get more women elected, as pointed out by Maha in her paper and others people. Currently is very low. So the question is that should we change the electoral system to allow that?
Wait, before you say that, let me just pause.
Yeah.
My personal view, not my party. Do you think women politicians out there would want to stand up and talk about women's issue? As of now, let's evaluate. Citizenship, ask yourself the question, who is saying more about citizenship? Let's ask me a question. So all I'm trying to say is sometimes on certain subject, the gender may not guarantee. So you must think about it carefully. Sometimes what I see, just again, personal, I've heard and I've seen since 2004 as an MP, certain issues, women MPs tell me, well, you know, we cannot raise because our party don't support the issue. But as a woman, personally, we support, but you don't want to say it out loud. And these are many issues before previous government. I don't want to quote names, but I'm telling you, I get disappointed. I'm like, ayo, say something. Now the citizenship, I want to see more women to talk about it. Do I hear anything? I hear more NGOs saying more things. Why? So now I've asked the OCC, the Office of the Child Commission is under me, to go around and knock at political party doors, call all the women politicians and brief them. Give them the technical understanding of this suggested amendment by the government, rightly or wrongly. I have to do that. You should be inviting them. But the NGOs are more loud on this issue. And then the NGOs are becoming political. Political parties are becoming like NGO. Come on, man. Grow up. And don't blame all politicians because not all of us are the same. So I'm not saying what on gender, but I'm saying there are issues. Stay loud. Take the risk. If the party doesn't like it, then leave. But do it. And people expect, especially women, on issues to be more louder because it affects. That's what I'm saying. My personal view, not my party. Sorry.
Pass the mic. Liana.
Women make up 50% of this country. And we should have a say in things like economy, in everything. So
of course.
If we change the FPTP to a mixed member proportional, for example, would that allow more women, more youth, more orang asli?
Look, my answer is very simple. Everything you say is betul, but it's always chicken and egg. Because let's take Muda as a party, as a young party. I don't know how it works. But expectation is high because you're representing the youth. But other political parties has also got youth wings who claim that they are more louder, they're more braver. You know how it works, So it depends because, I'm really sorry, but I have to tell the truth. For a candidate to run on state or federal election, you can't do it alone. It's expensive and it's difficult. You need support on the ground because the voters are multiplying. Every day, the 18 years old, the 17 plus becoming 18. Every day. I think, to be fair, I think for the state election, the numbers are almost 40% is going up. Beranak, naik. I'm telling you, this is not China, one child, one policy. I'm telling you, by the 16th general election, I'm telling you, the age will be amazing. So you have to understand, for political parties like ours, old party, old new party, or new old party, it's not an easy process. That's my personal view again.
Thank you so much, Datuk Sri.